Welcome to the Kentucky Bourbon Traveler. Today we're going on a great Tennessee bourbon hunt. We'll be dropping by some of the best Tennessee distilleries, checking out the Tennessee Bourbon's Lincoln County process. We're reviewing Cascade Hollow Distilling Company's George Dickel 8-year bourbon whiskey. And Christiana will show us how to make her Tennessee bourbon hot wings recipe. Hi, I'm Kent. Welcome back to Louisville, Kentucky. Thanks for joining us. If you haven't been by before, we cover only great bourbons found on the shelf and the distilleries that make them. The last year we've been on a great Tennessee bourbon hunt. Today we'll be by some of the best Tennessee bourbon distilleries, ending up at our pick for great Tennessee bourbon at the home of George Dickle, the Cascade Hollow Distillery. More than a few Tennessee distilleries sell whiskey under their own label that are imported from Kentucky or made from Distillery, which is often made by Lawrenceburg, Indiana's MGP Distillery. It's one way a distillery can pay the bills while they make and age their own new bourbon for at least the early years. How do you know the difference while hunting for original distillery-made, even better bourbons? Wait, take a look at these Tennessee bourbons. The Dickle and the Leffer's Fork bourbon bottles are both labeled Bottle and Bond, which by law proves they're made at the distilleries on the label. The Blue Note from Memphis is not Bottle and Bond, although it is stored in Tennessee. If you've ever been curious why most of the products from Tennessee are labeled Tennessee whiskey, the Lincoln County process is what usually results in the name change over to Tennessee whiskey. Tennessee whiskey, like Jack Daniel's, starts the same as bourbon. Most can be sold as bourbon since they age in new oak barrels with similar ingredients like over 51% corn. The use of pouring the Tennessee bourbon and filtering it through maple charcoal prior to barreling allows it to be labeled Tennessee whiskey. Here's how Tennessee whiskey's the Lincoln County process works. Whiskey uses maple wood, seen here stacked. Then the rick frames are burned down to a charcoal. The resulting charcoal is put in large vats with up to 15 feet deep. Their new make distillate is either dripped or poured through charcoal to filter or mellow the whiskey. The charcoal is used for up to 12 months of Jack Daniel's, and at Dickel as long as 18 months. You have great filtered limestone water for bourbon in Tennessee. Here next to Leffer's Fork Distillery, the distinct color of the water is a dead giveaway. You can see here at Rutledge Falls, close to Tullahoma and Lynchburg, the quality of their water. We're just a few miles from both Dickel's Cascade Hollow Distillery and Jack Daniel's. Dickel and Daniel's have limestone springs to get water from. The cave of Jack Daniel's Lynchburg Distillery shows how pure the local groundwater is, taken from deep in this cave. As a bonus, it doesn't require the common reverse osmosis purifying methods. Not far from Jack Daniel's Distillery, on the outskirts of the sleepy little southern town of Tullahoma, is the home of George Dickle at the Cascade Hollow Distillery. Diageo is a large London multinational who owns it, and you might have heard of them. They make Johnny Walker Scotch, Bailey's, Crown Royal, and Smirnoff vodka. This is the Cascade Hollow Distillery, built in 1958. The home of Dickel was known and named after the 1870s German immigrant George A. Dickel. He distilled about a half a mile away. Here you can see remnants of the foundation of the old distillery. It's thought to be here still, covered with moss across from the present-day Cascade Hollow water tower. Cascade Hollow Distillery has a small gift shop with an intimate, small group pub tasting room. They have a nice tasting flight too. You have the option of adding They're 9-year-old and 15-year-old Dickel single barrels, which is really interesting to contrast to their new offerings. In the past, Dickel was infamously known for their Tabasco barrel-finished whiskey and Tennessee whiskey, thought by some to be more a mixer than a drinking straight, neat quality product. That perception began to change in 2018 when Nicole Austin, a 33-year-old chemical engineer and craft producer, was appointed the new general manager and distiller. With Nicole's blending abilities, she was able to release a new product picked and blended from their existing inventory that is every bit the quality you would expect a Kentucky bourbon. Today we're reviewing Cascade Hollow Distillery's new 2021 George Dickel 8-year bourbon whiskey. At 90 proof, it's a pleasant breath of fresh air in an industry where 100 to 115 high proofers are getting more common. Dickle hasn't been recognized as a great bourbon brand here in Kentucky, so I was able to pick this up at Kroger for $18 on sale, although normally it offered here in Louisville about $33. Age-stating whiskeys are getting less common, but this Dickel is using 8-year-old and older bourbon. It has a real light mouthfeel, and it's buttery with hints of vanilla, brown sugar, oak, and fruit, with a finish that adds just a slight touch of spice, almost a cinnamon, on the finish. Dickel's 8-year is a sweeter bourbon on the scale, which reminds me of a lighter version of Old Pogue Kentucky bourbon or Old Forester Statesman. You might ask yourself why this charcoal mellowed bourbon whiskey tastes so much like Kentucky bourbon. We hear different explanations why Dickel bourbon ended up with classic bourbon notes. Blending barrels together is what creates the 8 years taste. But we're also told at the distillery that honeysuckle being around oak trees that ended up used in barrels can also result in sweeter oak aging. And perhaps lighter maple charcoal mellowing used actually on this bourbon as well could also be a factor. It's made using the sour mash method, using a little from the last batch. The mash bill and grain ingredients of Dickel products are 84% corn, 8% rye, and 8% malted barley. We saw a lot of corn used for Tennessee bourbon and whiskey on our hunt being delivered by Kentucky trucking companies. This 8-year-old bourbon was processed and mellowed by sugar maple as well. To age products, Dickel uses Eastern Tennessee white oak barrels charred to a number 4 with a number 2 char on the lids of the barrel. The second and fourth sample on this board show the difference in char burns. Barrels are then aged in one of their 14 single-story rick houses. Well, next up, Christiana has another great southern bourbon recipe for Tennessee bourbon hot wings. Go ahead, give up some of your bourbon for cooking. It's worth it.
Hi, I'm Christiana, originally from Würzburg, Germany, and today we are going to make Tennessee bourbon hot wings. So it's really simple. I have several spices, dry spices I put together, and also wet ingredients, and they're all explained in the recipe. I prefer to use this red hot Frank's hot sauce, and also in the dry ingredient, it's a special ingredient. It's smoked paprika, and make sure you get the smoked paprika. You can get it in any grocery store. So what I did, I have my chicken wings. I have the wet ingredients in one bowl, mix them all together. Now I'm going to add all my dry ingredients. Mix it up real good. It turns out kind of a little thick, but this is what you want. Mix it up real good. And then I'm just going to pour 3/4 of the sauce over the hot wings. I leave a little bit for dipping sauce. And then I'm gonna shake it and mix them very well together. After I tossed and coated all the chicken wings in the bowl really well, I arranged them on a cookie sheet, and then I preheated my oven to 350. So I baked the wings for 20 minutes on one side, turned the wings, 15 minutes on the other side, and then the last 5 minutes I'm going to put it on high broil just to get a little crisp on there. And also, if you can buy Memphis rub, which is in the dry ingredients, or you can, I have a recipe on which I make my own all the time. Now our Tennessee bourbon hot wings are fully cooked. I garnish them with nicely fresh cut green onions and served with some celery. Some of our Tennessee bourbon hot wing sauce, or to your liking, you can use hot mustard sauce or ranch dressing. Enjoy.
Kentucky Bourbon Traveler.